Today's episode is brought to you by the preseason.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I am your host, the Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not too much, my man. Another week, another Bills victory. This time
Woo!
We've clinched the playoffs.
Yeah.
You guys are so sick of hearing me talk about it. Not over yet.
Yep. If you're sick of it now.
We're clinching early. We're clinching playoffs early now. We're cruise control. We went duck hunting last night on prime time. Bagged ourselves 4 ducks from Duck himself. Just super exciting. Blevins was over for the game. Our buddy PJ we talk about all the time was over for the game. So shout outs to both of you coming over for that. Honestly, it was 2 years ago I watched them clinch, right? But I watched them clinch on somebody else's quarterback throwing a touchdown pass to somebody else's wide receiver.
Right.
And it was a different, right? And this season has a different feel. And as a fan of this team and a lifelong fan of this team, as you know, Blevins wouldn't know anything about.
True though.
It was very surreal to watch that. It was like it was something I've never gotten to really experience before in a time frame that I can honestly say I remember in detail. So it was great. It was a whole lot of fun. I'm excited to feel something very similar with the Outlaws next season.
I think you'll be feeling something very familiar to Bills fans with the Outlaws.
That's been the case every year. There's no news in that, if that's the story, Blevins.
True.
If that's the story, no news is bad news. But yeah, so just been enjoying the week. Otherwise, it was pretty terrible. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm in on this Bills train. I wore a Bills hat for the first.
You owned a Bills hat. We were both surprised, I think.
Well, it's actually my girlfriend's Bills hat, but I stole it. But it does have 100% playoff accuracy while on my head. So literally every single time I've worn the hat, the Bills have made the playoff. So let's put it out there. Good luck, Charm. But yeah, definitely we are out of the postseason and into the preseason. No more off-season shenaniganry. I mean, there might still be, but no, it'll be coming in at a smaller stream, a smaller trickle as we get into our preseason analysis, and we've got some juicy teams to talk about. We're going to be talking about the top 4 teams from season number 2, where they're at now, what they've done, what moves they've made, and how we think that they are going to finish season 3. So some bold predictions being made very, very early here on High Noon Podcast. But before we do that, of course, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. Blackwatch Report, of course, keeping it going. Make sure you're checking out the Blackwatch Report for all of your Tier 2 Overwatch needs. And I did want to bring up one thing, because we did get I actually want to bring up 2 things. First off, the YouTube video from last week got messed up. I went back to try to fix it. It's gone now. Okay, so if you're a YouTube only listener, sorry. Check out the podcast for last week's episode if you want to catch up. Otherwise, the YouTube videos will be back up in full swing this week. It should be. If you're watching this on YouTube now, it won't. Okay, that was a bit. Sorry, podcast listeners. That was a visual bit. It won't cut out on you. Don't worry. We are still here for you, YouTube fans and listeners. Another thing that I wanted to bring up was we got a little pushback from our episode last week about our take on Tier 2, and good. I'm glad that people, like we said, like we prefaced it with, we're not like super passionate about it, right? That's like Blackwatch Report is going to have a much more probably coherent opinion and thought on it, so definitely check out them. But we were calling it like we saw it, right? Is it from a position that we've experienced? Yes. Would I call something from a position I haven't experienced? No. But definitely, if you want to listen to that, I think we had a good discussion. I think we laid out our thoughts on it, and if you disagree with that, that's great. Let us know in Discord, and we're happy to continue that conversation on in the Discord for sure.
But maybe don't start your comment with "you guys are better than this" or something like that, because if you think that, you've not been paying attention.
Yeah, we are not better than anything.
all we did was have an opinion, and
Right.
this individual happened to disagree with it, and that's fine, well and good. But it's just like, stop with the "you disagree with me, you're a bad guy" thing. If you come at me like that in a comment section, I'm not going to be nice about it. It's just it's just the way it's going to be.
You're better than this. Well, hold on. In response, you are better than that. So touche. Sir.
Right. Stop arguing with people about that. This is esports. This is fun. It might be a living for the people that play it. It's not for us. It's not for you as a fan. Okay. And I get it. If you're more into tier 2, there's plenty of those people than Overwatch League. You care about it more. You have a different opinion. That's why we gave our preface on that conversation, and also why we went out of our way to make sure you guys knew where you could go to get more information, to get, hear other parts of that conversation. And there's so much. It's very, very nuanced, and we devoted a portion of a short episode to the topic, so it was a little incomplete, and I'm not apologizing for that. We told you it was incomplete when we did it. But yeah, so just when things like that come up, and this isn't even when dealing with us, because you're not going to listen to me when dealing with us, right? Half of my interaction with people on Discord is like, I want to troll Deathblow, I'm going to go into Discord.
I know it's half of my interactions,
and that's great. I love that. I engage with that on purpose, right? Like, I don't avoid it. If you guys enjoy doing that, I'm going to participate in it. But just in general, right? Like, that's when I was talking about don't treat Blizzard like the bad guy. It's taking that stance in an argument, right? And taking that viewpoint and that attacking it that way, that I think is unhealthy. And that's why we're kind of bringing up that comment in particular and addressing it. And it was on the YouTube video, so it didn't last long because we took the 9-minute episode down. But to just kind of bring it to light here, it's so insane to think to come at somebody like that and act like they're ignorant or they're stupid just because they formed a different opinion than you about something. Stop.
And spent 40 minutes explaining it and going through all the reasons and
it's not like we articulated it to the point where you think, oh, they don't have all the information. I think we presented enough of it to know we had a decent idea of it. So anyways, we digress. We had a lot of fun with that conversation. Just a reminder, deal with us however you want, but don't approach these conversations so black or white. It's two sides that want Path to Pro to succeed and tier 2 to blossom and to bloom and to be profitable and big money for the player. It's like, everybody wants that. Everybody's trying to get there, right? Everybody's on the same team. So stop clawing each other's eyes out, and everybody will be much better for it. You'll get to the final solution faster.
Ooh, phrasing. No, not even gonna go down that path. But
You'll have to explain that one to me. I'm too old for that one, I guess.
Not even gonna. I'll tell you after the show. What I will say is that we're not like you said, we're not apologizing for what we said. In fact, we're doubling down. I thought about it all week, and we were 100% right. And everyone who thinks wrong, or everyone who thinks differently, is wrong, and that's okay.
And the one thing we agreed on and really proposed as a solution, I thought, was put into spectacular display this weekend too, and clearly not because of us. The one thing we said was get more third-party one-off tournaments, and this was third party, but how many people enjoyed watching this event this weekend? How many people enjoyed getting to see Hex and ZP back in the booth together? And people were taking to Twitter like, this feels like the old days when everybody was happy and all these things.
We got Boop NATO as well.
Yeah, everybody was there.
Ham NATO, Boop NATO, Hamasaurus.
Truth be told, it was people that were associated with Overwatch League for a long time, whether that was Jake and Custa playing in the event shortly after their retirements, or there was multiple levels of competition. There was multiple streamers, and everybody was involved in this. People were sprinting, tripping over themselves to get involved with this event. And it was a blast. I need to catch up on a lot. I need to watch some VODs. I need to see some more of the Custa off-tank shenaniganry. But it was just a ton of fun. I don't think anybody has a bad thing to say about the event. The only people that may have had a negative experience, went winless in the tournament or something like that. And we don't have to worry about that. They're not mad at the event. They're mad at themselves. So
there's some other people that will get you deducted points on a certain game show that are mad about people aimbotting, but that's a whole other thing that I don't care about.
No. We'll only talk about things like that when they're from when they have any credibility to them, and I've not seen anything.
We only talk about Big Kef, by the way.
Big Kef, how is
low Kef? I don't know. I haven't talked to Thorne in a while. Yeah. But you can check him out on the Blackwatch Report, which is what brought up this whole thing. But we're moving on here, and we are going to get into some news. It worked. The sounds worked. It only took me testing it 15 times before, and now me explaining that it worked completely undid them working in the first place.
Yep. I was going to say now we're one step closer to just playing sound drops and not interrupting the show as a result.
Hey, if people would have been like, people are like not even like they might just be like listening offhandedly and being like, oh, he's queuing up a drop, and in their mind they're waiting for there to be a fumble, and then when it happens right away, they're probably caught off guard. So I needed to talk about that for another 15 to 20 seconds.
Well, be ready, fans, because if you're frustrated by the sound drop stuff, me too, and we're getting it fixed.
It is fixed, and now I can move on from explaining the fact that it's fixed after every time it works. But we do have some news. We talked about this last week, but this is relevant to another story. Jake, of course, is retired from the Houston Outlaws. Custa has retired from the LA Valiant, but now Jake has been confirmed to be a match commentator for the talent team, and Custa, is the new commentator.
Match commentator for Jake. I stopped typing mid-sentence.
Okay. And Custa is on the desk, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. I knew that one without having to read it. But that's big. I mean, maybe not the biggest surprise, but it's good to have the official confirmation now.
Yeah. And listen, when you've got somebody that's too smart for some metas, right, you need to pair them with some other really big brains. So might as well just stick them smack dab between Sideshow and Bren, right? Wait a minute. Oh, anyways.
How many eyebrows does Sideshow have right
now? Between him and Bren, they have at least one. At least one. I don't know how connected Bren's is off the top of my head. They
probably have 8 heads.
At least one. Yeah, but so I think this is great. Obviously, we've seen Jake doing some casting. I think this is a move that was pretty easy to see coming, especially immediately following the retirement, right? The question to me was, do they make him spend a year cutting his teeth on Contenders casting before he comes up? They're not going to do that, which is great. I think he's been very successful every time he's gotten the opportunity to do it. He didn't seem out of water or anything like that, which can certainly happen with players that decide to make that particular jump, especially right away.
Right.
He's just very eloquent, so I think it really just fits him very, very well. And yeah, we don't have any announcements about anybody leaving the desk or the talent team at all at this time, although our Discord, I know, immediately speculated you can't add one caster, right? Like you would then have to just doesn't work that way. But I'm personally not expecting anybody to leave. I'm expecting another addition or two on both sides, just because they're not going to send every desk analyst to China every time they need to go there, right? So they're going to send a team to handle the weekend, and then there's going to be 2 weekends going on, so they need 2 full teams handling there, probably 2 casting duos to alternate. So I think we're looking at additions rather than any subtractions here. There could be 1 or 2, you never know, but yes, and the desk analyst is great. And listen, I think Bren and Sideshow do a phenomenal job and are very insightful on the desk. I do think, however, Custa is going to be able to kind of take that to the next level here and really bring that pro insight and just all things considered, this just feels great to me. They're adding balance, they're adding talent, they're adding knowledge. I even said in Discord, I mean, as a Houston fan, I'm pumped about this, not even just because Jake's going to be ridiculously pro Houston. He's honestly probably going to be tripping over himself not to be.
Right.
In all honesty, that's usually how it goes. And Houston fans might end up a little mad at Jake while he does it, because they don't think he's giving them credit, or, you know, it's going to feel a little weird to hear him maybe criticize them at times or something like that. But, I kind of laughed absentmindedly. Oh, it's nice to think there might be like a pro Houston caster to wash out Monty a little bit, who's anti-Houston. And I even love Monty being anti-Houston. He's great at it, and he's just it's great to have that negative energy should be there, right? Like, it's okay not to love every team. It's okay to pick on one. But, you know, as a fan of the team, it would be nice to have that balance. So I kind of joked around a little there, but I think that's very true in this case as well. I don't know that there's any other teams that have a vocal dissenter amongst the cast and crew of the talent desk. But
I mean, besides everyone when NYXL is in the playoffs, in which case everyone's like, oh, sandbag, oh, they choke on the playoffs, oh.
Well, everyone probably includes the NYXL players and staff too in that regards. But
a lot of former staff, by the way. A lot of former staff.
That's hard to listen to. On the outside looking in, though, I've got to say, there's a decent chance that's just honest analysis, whereas a ASMR YouTube video about Houston losing map 5s or whatever, I don't know, I can't listen to ASMR. It's the cringiest thing in the world to me, so I couldn't make it through it. But I could listen to enough to get the gist. There's a little bit of a different flavor to what Monty does. Again, it's great. I love it, but some balance at times would feel good, especially when Houston's doing poorly and they're piling on the broadcast, it feels bad, right? When they're doing good or even just average or okay, and there's somebody taking shots at them, it's great. I love it.
It's funny.
But yeah, it'll be nice to see maybe a little bit a pro Houston talk potentially, but I don't expect it personally.
I just think it'll be nice. I mean, I think Wolf and Achilleos just knocked it out of the park when they got added into the rotation. They did a really good job.
Yes.
Just adding another duo in there, maybe mixing people up. I have no idea what the casting spread is going to be like, but just getting some new voices in is good. I mean, I think all of the casting duos have been great so far.
Yes.
I have not had any complaints with a single casting duo. And I think that having more, I mean, if I was an Overwatch caster, I would want to just be a part of that group, because you're just getting so much experience and knowledge with that group of people. I mean, and from all sorts of places. I mean, if you watch some of Mitch's caster reviews, it's insane. He's like a different person. He's like like stopping like second by second and just like going through so much stuff. Monty and Doa bring another set of skills as well from casting, and really they all do. And I think it'll be nice to have even more people. I mean, they need to start building that talent, right? Because if a lot of them are contracted, right? So at the end of the day, if they get a better offer, or they're just not feeling Overwatch, or they want to move on to something else, like, they need to have people in that pipeline that are ready to go and starting to build them up and get there. So I'm interested to see how they do the casting spread, and what if we're gonna see like, Monty and Doa are they are casting the games in the East, and we're seeing, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they do that. Or if certain casting duos are always going to cast certain teams, like, that would be almost kind of interesting, because it's like you get the national broadcast for professional or for traditional sports, right? And a lot of times they just call it down the middle. But if you get the local casts, right? If you get the in-network cast, if you're watching a Yankees game and you're watching the Yes Network, the cast of that game is going to be different. And if you're a fan of that team, a lot of people want to listen to that, because it's like, I'm a fan. I'm not trying to be down the middle. I don't want that's why people hate Joe Buck so much, because he has to call it down the middle.
If anybody but Rick Jenneret casts a Sabres game, I'm probably turning it off.
I mean, that's only partly because hockey's nigh unwatchable, but
Says the baseball fan.
I am not a baseball fan anymore. I
I meant
wasn't.
basketball. I meant basketball.
Oh, basketball is. I mean, okay, boomer. I'm getting the okay boomers in now. But it would be interesting to see if they played with that dynamic, because that's something that is definitely in traditional sports. And there theoretically could be co-broadcasts if they opened it up. There's no reason that there can't be, a Toronto caster for all the games, for the Toronto games, like doing a Toronto broadcast.
Yeah, that's a little bit how we kind of thought they'd do it, right? As teams would kind of hire their casting duos, or even if
Right.
it's not like full-time hire, you contract them for an event or something like that.
Right.
I did think that might have been the way it went, but doesn't seem to be that way. But I'm personally, yeah, I want to see, like I said, one more caster, maybe 3 more casters. Obviously, you need an even number of additions, or an even number of casters, but I'd love to see maybe ZP finally get in.
Yes.
They might reshuffle, but honestly, I think Jake and ZP have been a caster duo for
Right.
World Cup already. I thought they did very well together. So I would almost tend to see that, although the allure of the Hex ZP reunion in Overwatch League is pretty great.
That would be full circle.
Right. It would be awesome. But I just love the Sexler combo on the mic.
Yeah.
That's very strong.
It's very good. They are.
I've just you get ready for the first OK Boomer, I believe, of the show, or I deserve of the show, I should say. I just don't like change and stuff like that. Like I got used to them, even if I had problems at the beginning or whatever. Now they're mine. I'm comfortable with it. I want to keep them around.
That, and they've gotten better casting with themselves, or with each other rather, over the years. So it'll be new if they switch those around. You definitely would want a specific reason to switch them around, but we'll see. I think that's definitely very interesting, because I mean that's what we're going to be listening to all season, right? So we want it to be good, and it's a big part of the league, if nothing else. Okay. We'll keep you informed on that as it happens. But one last actual change here. We've got Jaru has been signed by the LA Gladiators, formerly the Flex DPS for Team Envy. Do we have anything relevant or interesting to say about that? No.
They would have to make a much more interesting signing, I think. Listen, there's nothing wrong with Jaru, but the problem when you look at the Gladiators roster right now is that they lack star power in the DPS. Right, you look at their tank line and you go, if OGE plays all their games, I like their tank line. Him in space sounds good to me. We know Ashez and Big Goose are. They're the rock of this team, this franchise. They give you a chance just by being there and being a duo, right? But are we talking about a team that we want to just remain, 4 to 6 at all times? Just can't. Just permanently locked in there, or do we want? Does the team want to get better? That's the way I'm judging teams in the off season. Are you going to be good, or are you going to be bad? Did you make yourself better, or did you make yourself worse? And I look at this roster, and I think probably worse. Right? Like it's just. I don't know. Their tank line was a problem. I get that. They just made more changes than they needed to. And now I think they've got themselves in potentially a worse spot overall. But who knows? Because the Valiant had more upwards potential. And to me, their roster construction, at least in style, is very similar to what the Valiant were for their first 2 years. And that's, confidence in the support line, really good tank line. And then we'll get our DPS players to overperform because they're kind of average. And so maybe that can work. And it's certainly not unreasonable to think that Jaru comes in and fills a role like that and is like their agilities and just pops off and gets the job done, works with the team well, sort of a thing. But I'll believe that when I see it of every team, right? Because it's just as likely that they don't mesh well together and that you don't get more out of your deep, you get less out of them because they, the team environment, things like that. So, a very uninspired and unexciting signing here for the Gladiators to me. Their roster didn't get better or worse with it. So.
Right. The only thing that is interesting to me, and I don't even really want to go into it, is like, why did they wait this long to tell us this? If like the signings have been done for however long, like this was not a like, ooh, let's sit on this and wait and then give it out for press. It's like,
I don't think they're done. I don't think there was an end date to the signings. I think there was exclusivity windows, and then free agency open until the end of stage, or whatever the date is, since the stages are gone. That's my understanding.
For some reason, I thought there was maybe they needed to have, maybe the teams needed to have their starters locked. They're 8. Okay.
There were 8 required.
Yes. Okay, that's what I was thinking of. Okay, so we'll still see some bench filler there. Okay, then I have literally nothing additional to say about the Jaru signing. So we'll move on from that, and we will get into the beginning now. You can shoot the starter pistol here as we begin officially, actually absolutely unofficially, but officially begin the preseason. Oh, let's break it. Yeah! Okay, we are going to, as we mentioned before, we're going to be talking about 4 teams per episode for the next few episodes, which will lead us right up into week number 1 with a week off for the holiday. And we're going to start at the top here, which of course means we are starting with the San Francisco Shock. Death, run us through it.
Yeah, so there's only one roster move made at all here for San Francisco. Why we're starting with them? They're the least likely to make any changes or moves, and make this episode less valuable in the future. But they let Nevix go. He obviously ended up with the Toronto Defiant. But when we look at what they were able to do last year, it's an impressive little resume here, Blevins. We've got league champions for starters. They came in 2nd place in stage 1, 1st place in stage 2, and 2nd place in stage 3. So there was not a playoff or playoff-like scenario in which this team didn't at least make it to the finals throughout the entire year. That's remarkable efficiency and consistency that this team showed throughout the year. And really the only thing that made you not really realize what was going on while it was happening was the fact that the Vancouver Titans were 1 spot above them in the standings throughout the entire year. They did get off to a little bit of a slow start, but you can see the consistency. Even that, right, is a little bit disingenuous to say. They just weren't red hot right out of the gate, right? It took them a little bit to heat up. There's no maps that were a losing record for the San Francisco Shock. Every single one of them was at least 500 or better, or 50% or better. 50%, however, was the exact map win percentage for Dorado, and 55 on Ilios. That's a percentage again. It was as bad as it gets for this team. That equated to an 86% win rate on Assault, 84% on Escort, 74% on Hybrid, 68% for Control. That meant a 23-5 total match record, Blevins, good for the 2nd seed. So there's a lot to love about what this team is and what they were able to do. So I'm going to ask the most difficult question of you right out of the gate. And what is the biggest weakness for the San Francisco Shock going into this year?
I mean, the biggest weakness is it's not even necessarily a weakness to them as much as it is a growth for the rest of the season. I guess the weakness is almost like stagnation, right? And it's a fine line to walk, right? Because we talked about, well, if you're in first place, if you're at the top, you want to reduce the variance as much as possible. You don't want to be making a bunch of moves. You don't want to be doing this. They don't want to. They really don't want to break up and do something crazy, right? They want to stay as consistent as possible, but we've seen the rest of the league is absolutely not doing that. And I think in the beginning of the season, that is going to favor the San Francisco Shock. But I was just perusing their first few games of the 2020 season, and I'm not sure that was going to matter anyway. They've got a pretty light schedule. I mean, granted, we don't know exactly how great these teams are going to be anyway, but they're starting off their season against the Fuel, which I don't think too many people are thinking extremely high of the Fuel. Now, they have made a lot of changes, but then we'll talk about them later. Then they play the Dragons, another contender, Hunters. I mean, the long story short is, they're not necessarily going to be needing that. If they were playing Vancouver, New York, Seoul the first 3 games of the season, okay, yeah, maybe they're going to be heavily favored here because other teams who maybe are making changes, figuring out how they want to work with the new players in their roster. Just having the consistent, just run it back. That's going to be worth something for some amount of the season. I don't know how much that's going to matter, in week 10 or whatever, later on when all the teams have been traveling on the road and really have bonded together and have been practicing for the entire year. I'm not sure how that's going to change. So I think that these teams are going to figure out how to get the best out of their rosters at that point. So really, the San Francisco Shock, sure, they're obviously a good team. They were they were better than a good team. They were a fantastic team in season 2, and there's no reason to think that they are worse than they were last year. But there's not really that much reason to think that they're better, especially compared to all the other crazy changes and moves and new talent being brought in for season 3.
In a vacuum, there's no reason to expect them to be better. They didn't add anything, and they lost somebody, right? And that team spoke very, very highly of Nevix on his way out the door, which tells you that he was important to that team. They got good use out of him. He was a good teammate, whatever it was. So even if it won't impact their actual starting 6 or who's ever on the stage, because I don't think Nevix played at all, maybe like a token map or two here or there, something late in the year. But so there's no argument to me to make that they got better. The argument you're trying to make is the NYXL argument. They were elite in season 1. They did nothing. They ran it back. They fell back down closer to the middle. I mean, they were still a very good team, still top 3, but didn't get better, right? And that's, I think, something that is very reasonable to expect from the San Francisco Shock this season. I do have a different answer for what their biggest weakness is. And it's not going to be a popular opinion, but it's the main tank position. Listen, if Super was the main tank that they wanted him to be, then they wouldn't have played Smurf on Orisa.
Right.
And yes, we saw Super play Orisa and play it pretty well in the World Cup. But I think clearly they don't have the all-around, fully compatible main tank player that they can just put in, never take out. I think it's safe to say they would want to do that if they thought they had it, because Choi Hyo-bin did not leave that stage because other players with backups didn't get in. So that wasn't a matter of, well, we just want to get this guy playtime. In my mind, this was, we think the other guy's better. Now we're talking about the number 1 team, and I'm naming their biggest weakness. Do I think it's a mortal wound or like a fatal flaw for this team? No, absolutely not. I think main tank is one of the yes, absolutely. I think main tank is one of the positions you can do this effectively at, right? There's some very massive stylistic differences between a lot of the different main tank heroes, and I don't think there's enough players in Overwatch and players in the league or players good enough to cross over and play them all at a very, very elite level like that. So it's just to say that they could very easily hit a meta where one of these tanks struggles, or they get it wrong about who's better, right? They play the wrong one, he struggles, they drop a couple games. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I mention this as a weakness. Not, oh, they're doomed, or teams are going to be able to just punish their main tank position. It's that it's suboptimal, it's not ideal. Okay, we're talking about trying to repeat as champions. So I think that's something they're going to want to look at. Super was a young kid. I'm sure the coaching staff is working with him. Maybe this year he is that guy, right? Because he did look really good at it in the World Cup. That's definitely within the range of outcomes. But if I'm looking at this most complete roster that didn't really lose much of anything that they were using and asked what their weakness is, that's what's going to be my answer. So Blevins, let's look at this. They were 23-5 in their match record last season. What do you put them at this year?
So I think we're playing a total of 28 games this season. I don't know. I do think that they're going to be a notch. They're going to be a notch down. Not because they've gotten worse, but just because I think there's just so much. There's so much tape that's still relevant on them, right? Like nothing has changed. So all of the tape from last season, you're reviewing that for your matches. You don't even week 1, Dallas Fuel have a whole season of tape, or at least a whole stage of relevant tape on them, and stylistic preferences and whatnot. So I do think, and I mean, just the inherent, there's going to be a giant red bullseye on their head. They are target number 1. I mean, even last year, even though London won, it did not feel like it was still Vancouver and New York for the most part until San Francisco kind of blew up. That were like, okay, these are number one, number two, coming into the season. Now it's like, nope, San Francisco, stamp it in. They're who we are trying to be. Every team is, like we've talked about for literally years now. They're able to play loosey goosey. You're not going to necessarily expect to win or like have huge expectations because they are the world champions. They've won so much. But that means that you get to play a little bit different. You get to try things out. You get to, it's a free roll, right? You're not expecting to win. So anything that you get is playing with house money. So all of those factors, lead me to believe that I don't know that we're going to see the same sort of almost flawless in a lot of times, especially in stage number 2 where they were literally had the golden stage. I'm giving them still a pretty great record at 21-7.
Yeah, I'm very close to that. I tend to always predict what's called in fantasy football, at least, regression to the mean. So if I look at the team with the best or an outlier record, I'm always going to bring that win total down. I will still have this team at number 1 in my power rankings. I'm going to put them at a record of 19-9 personally. As you said, they've got that target on their back. And we mentioned this in the pre-show, or maybe before we even went live with that. It really feels like talent spread out this offseason. It didn't consolidate. There are no super teams formed that I can really see. There's a couple that look like they may have tier jumped or something like that, but none that are I would call a super team or anything like that. So I think they're loss total almost certainly has to go up, and again, this is all without knowing what the meta will be, fitting anything into that. This is broad scope, just in a vacuum looking at it. So I do expect the win total to go down. Their place in the standings probably stays roughly the same, 1-2 in that range. And they're in a really, really good spot, but it's hard to imagine them being more dominant or something like that when you look at how New York transitioned to year 2, things like that. So yeah, we're both having this team squarely in the playoffs. Very, very likely to be, I think, the Pacific Division's leader in number 1 seed or number 2 seed in the playoffs, but definitely things are closing in on them rather than they're not distancing themselves from the pack. So gonna make for a very interesting year and maybe a little more indecision, or what's the word I'm looking for? Suspense for the San Francisco Shock fan base, I think, and that'll hopefully make the season a little more fun for you. But you should still, I think, be pretty happy about it.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, unless and only in very few matchups in any sport are you like, well, no reason to watch this one. It's like even number 1 versus number last place. They're going to win some number of those games. Last place is going to win some number of those games.
Miami's going to beat New England in Week 17, and the Bills will be the AFC East champions. It's the perfect example. Thanks for letting me bring it up. Thanks for letting me bring that up again, buddy.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm throwing you the alley-oop in football. But yeah, I do think...
Oh, my brain.
It does. It does seem like the talent has spread out. We're gonna sort of round out the edges, so to speak, of the Overwatch League. We're not gonna have S tier followed by big jump, B plus tier followed by the rest of the pack. I think we're probably gonna have a lot more like A, B plus, A minus tier. At least that's how it seems. Which I think is a little bit interesting because I feel like we maybe thought the opposite in previous seasons where it was like, oh, well, we were wrong about it, but Dallas and Seoul, holy crap, they're so much better, and there's a lot of unknowns there. So I think a lot of people either rated teams super, super high or super, super low, and now maybe it's just because we know a little bit more now, just not just about the teams, but about how this ends up playing out, that we're rounding it out a little bit. So it'll be extremely interesting to see how these teams end up playing out. But Deathbow, let's move on to the number 2 team in Season 2 of Overwatch League. That is the Vancouver Titans.
Yeah, first in your standings, second in the playoff race, in the playoff standings, but lost in the grand finals. First in stage 1, second in stage 2, third place in stage 3. This offseason they released Repel, Tizzy, Hureg, Bumper, and signed Fissure and Jayhong. So a lot of star power in the additions here for the Vancouver Titans, which makes them fascinating to look at and talk about. Now, let's look at, they had one map with a losing record this year. It was Havana, which was a late addition. They played it less than all the other maps. Theoretically would have been able to figure it out, get it under control, and probably be okay on that. So I don't think that's any cause for alarm. 50% on Paris and Nepal. Don't know what's up with Nepal there, but Paris is a very 50-50 kind of map to me. I don't know. That doesn't alarm me too much. And overall, when you look at the map win percentages, they're all 65% or better. Hybrid is 76, Control 73, Escort is 69, and Assault is 65. I was like doing the mental math. Do I make a joke about it?
You knew I was going to.
That's what you have co-hosts for, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, good for 25
synergy.
Good for 25-3 overall match record, the number 1 overall seed going into the playoffs. But Blevins, they made so many changes.
Yeah.
It begs the question, was it just too risky?
Well, I will pair my answer with that with my prediction for how they're going to play out, because I've got
you have a range of
I have a range here. Well, it's not a range, it's an either or, because a range would be a cheating answer. This is a just stupid hedge. Was it too risky? It depends on what metric you're going by, but my gut says yes. Now we have to ignore if we're talking as if Vancouver decided to do all of these things and not players wanted to leave and internal things. We'll ignore those because that's okay. If they like came to irreconcilable.
In the past, when people have left and they've been disgruntled, we've heard about it.
Right.
And we haven't heard anything about any of the players that left. So it's safe to say.
And so that we don't have an hour of us explaining and re-explaining, we'll just assume that the team made all of the decisions of their own volition for strategy reasons and not other reasons. I think it was too risky because you're only like, what are your... when you make big changes, right? You make a big change. You sign a big, splashy player, arguably the splashiest player that you could have signed reasonably in Fissure. And when you do something like that, you either are trying to make a big splash on your team and jump up a bunch of placements and just hand the keys to the Cadillac over to him. It's your car now, bud. Drive us to grand finals. Or you do the soul and just say, psych, and never let him drive the car. You just give him one of those, little fake baby cars where he's honking the horn and he thinks he's driving, like Maggie Simpson in the Simpsons intro. And I think Fissure said, no, none of the soul BS. It's my car, or we're not doing this. And the problem with that is that when you're doing that to try to jump up a bunch of spots and places in the league, and there's only one spot to jump, and in the regular season there was nowhere to go but down, it really makes me think that taking a big risk and making a big splash on your team, if you have to move and there's only one way to move and that move is down, that's a risk that I don't want to take as the Vancouver Titans.
Yeah, I totally get everything you've said there. And my thing about this is that I've never seen Fissure play poorly. I've just never seen it.
Not poorly.
Seen him not have his best game. Right.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I've
seen
everything he played in Overwatch League. There's been times he's been okay. There's been times he's been superb.
Sure.
we've seen the impact he can have joining a team before. We've seen the impact he can have leaving a team before.
Yep.
And while it's a little different in this case because he didn't really hurt Seoul when he left, and he massively helped. And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it, but he massively upgraded the Gladiators when he joined them.
Yes.
There's not room to massively upgrade this team, but I think you get my point, right? I think he handles changing teams and coaching staffs and systems and styles pretty well. And I think the things that bother him, he's been very vocal about. The Vancouver Titans were able to talk to him and sit down with him and say, hey, you know, what are you looking to do? What do you want to do? So I tend to think this is likely to work out, whether it turns them into the champions they want to be or not. You know, they just got to keep Fisher happy. And when you have a whole organization that seems to be going out of its way to make sure that the guy's going to be happy, I just don't think it's going to be a major concern. Could certainly be wrong. This isn't XQC, who I instantaneously upon him being signed with remarkable accuracy predicted how his career would go, to be perfectly honest with you. He's not a problem player like that. Okay. He's just a little temperamental and wants his way. But I think he might actually be good enough that it's worth it and should be done.
Sure.
It's certainly risky, but we just did 3 minutes each on how the San Francisco Shock got worse and things got closer because of the league. They made so much movement. So I like this risk. I like this chance that they're taking. They have enough of a core. If it blows up and goes as bad as humanly possible, sign someone mid-season, scrape your way into the playoffs and go on a run. I don't think as bad as it can really be tragic for this team and cost them a play-in berth or something like that. There's too much talent on the rest of the roster, even if three to 5 games are played with literally Ryu Jae-hong playing Winston again, like we saw in season 1. This should still be a playoff team, right? So I kind of like it. There's time in the season to adapt if they need to. Their win total will regress because, as I said, they were first place. They're not going to have 2 losses next year. There's no GOATs. So that in and of itself should be enough to make you confident that it's going to fall off a little bit here, at least in win total record. But I think they're going to be just fine. I think they're still going to be really, really good. 18-10 is where I'm putting them.
Yeah. I didn't actually get to my record in that long rant, but I think they are either going to be 16-12, which is which is lower than yours, which it's low, probably unreasonably low, or they're going to be 23-5. Those are the two. Fisher either takes the team and drives them way up, and I think that's the difference between a strong first place, which is what they've done, which was basically what they ran the whole season for season 2 as, or that's probably what, 4th, 5th place, maybe?
I already looked it up, so I have the exact numbers.
What would it be?
They still wouldn't have fallen into the play-ins, and they would have been the 7th seed, tied with the Atlanta Reign and the London Spitfire with a 16-12 record last year. So
that's probably a little bit too low, but you get my point. I'm going. It's probably realistically, it's probably somewhere in between those two, but those are my picks. I'm taking 2 of them.
It supported my argument very well.
Right.
But on the bad side of things, it's not that bad.
Right.
And you can just play well in the playoffs and still have your chance to win the league. So yeah, I think we're in pretty much lockstep agreement here. We just word our arguments differently.
Yep. I think so.
Well, now we're going to move on to the one that, I don't know, you're going to talk the most, but you should talk the least.
Because I might talk the least.
Because you can't possibly look at this objectively.
And I absolutely won't.
Much like when we get to Houston, I won't either.
Yeah.
But New York Excelsior are the next team we're going to look at here, Blevins. They let go of Flower, Mego, woo, and Pine retired. They have signed Hatpa, Bianca, Mandu. I'm going to call him Mandu for now. Mandu. And then who are you?
I'm Blevins. So we've been casting. Oh, okay. Sorry. I had to make that joke at least once.
There is a lot going on with what the New York Excelsior have done here. Almost making it near impossible for me to like ballpark where I think this team is going to be. But let's look at what they were last year and try to go from there. So third place finish, they were fifth in stage 1, third in stage 2, fifth in stage 3, and again third place overall, made it through the winners bracket till Vancouver and then lost twice, right? I think that's how that went.
Yes.
Yeah, Vancouver made it from the winners bracket because so that's how it had to go. So they runner ran into Vancouver, then San Francisco, I believe, and was eliminated. So as far as bad maps go, the numbers are starting to pick up a little bit here. Crazy to think after what their map records were season 1. But Blizzard World was 20%, Lijiang Tower was 33%, Route 66 was 40%, and Dorado was 33%. That was good for just about 60% across the board in map wins in the game modes. 66 for hybrid, 61 for escort, 60% both for control and assault. That was good for 22-6 overall match record and the first seed in their division, which was the Atlantic division. So this was not the season NYXL fans were hoping for. The team really never lived up to that season 1 fire and flair that they had in the goats meta, and even as we transitioned into the May Reaper shenanigans meta, the Doomfist stuff, that just never fell together for this team or came together for this team. So I want to ask you, Blevins, what has to happen? How do these new players have to work out? What do you need to see from Hot Bianca is what we should call him, the combination of the off tank position until we know who's starting and who's not. And I guess who are you is another one. Like, so what has to happen with this team and how they've built it going into season 3 to get them back to the elite, to end that conversation of 1A, 1B, or one all by themselves all over again?
Okay, so this might be unpopular for my fellow NYXL fans, but rest assured it is a positive overall. I think that this possibly, and I know people are just going to start screaming sandbag when I say this, but I think this could possibly be a developmental year in the same sense that San Francisco used season 1 as a developmental year. I think, obviously, I don't think anyone is saying that Hot Bianca or Bianca is an upgrade to Meko.
We'll get there. We don't have it yet, but we're gonna find it. Now it's my mission.
I don't know.
Can't force it.
Can't force it. It'll come eventually. But I think we work on the transition. Is SBB going to stay as a main DPS? Is it going to be, who are you? Whose team is this? Who are we giving I'm going to keep using the Cadillac. Who are we giving the keys to the Cadillac? Is the team still focused around Jonak? We don't know yet. I think, honestly, the biggest changes for NYXL, the most impactful changes for NYXL are on the coaching staff and not the players. Obviously, Meko being gone is a loss, but actually, Flower getting released and Pine retiring is almost like, okay, we're not just standing by complacently and just like, oh, we're just going to run back season 1. We didn't win, but whatever, we're going to play. Like, they went from elite, like you said, they went from like, we're winning events, we're winning stages, we're doing this, that, and the other, to like, we're the PTQN boss that never gets there.
From NYXL to MYXL?
We'll get there. From Meko to Meko is closer.
I don't know. I need more time on that one. You caught me off guard. Save it for the Houston episode.
Get your puns ready for Houston. Okay, we'll be more prepared then. But they went from being like that elite team to being the star of the show for season 1 to just the end boss that San Francisco and Vancouver had to get through, and a lot of the times it wasn't even super close. It was in the playoffs, in the actual season playoffs. They were pretty close games, kind of. But like, they certainly fell from grace, and I think like if we go as NYXL fans go into this season expecting them to just jump right back up, we're gonna get the wind knocked out of us because I don't personally think that's going to happen right now. As the most diehard NYXL fan, I'm claiming that title, by the way. Not really. Anyone who is in New York City has that more than I do. But as the next best thing, I have all the confidence in the world in the team, but this season is not the last season for the team. I'm looking at it. I want a championship. It doesn't have to be this year. I would love it to be this year. That would be great. But if I'm looking at it, from I would rather have a 99. I would rather have a higher chance at a championship in 1 or 2 years than force it to happen this year, if that makes sense. They've brought some new talent in. This is really kind of the first time. And we saw Nene come in. He actually did come in and do a lot. Obviously, Animo almost felt like it just a complete swap to Arc, like nothing, not really like a huge change there. Like if we could start to see the team not focusing around and relying so much on Jonak. We could see the power shift. Could it be Who Are You? Could it be back to the DPS? We don't know. Maybe it's meta dependent. Maybe it's coaching decision dependent. But I think there's enough there and enough change. We talked about with the first two teams, with Vancouver, the change maybe was too much for them. With San Francisco, the lack of change was not enough, potentially, but this is a good amount of change in a good spot. New York has that chance to go up a few spots and actually be an elite team. They do have the chance to fall back down as they develop, too, and I think that has to be a reasonable expectation for NYXL fans going into this season. Because if we see Who Are You pop off and the rest of the team not get there, great. We've got next season, we've got mid-season to bring some people in, get them in on the system, let the coaches get their bearings, push the team in the right direction. If we see that, even with a lower than expected record, I'm going to be happy as a fan. Maybe not in the season, especially since I'm going to hear nothing but crap the whole season every time they lose. But as a long time and like looking into the future, that's going to be a good result for NYXL. And now I can breathe.
Doesn't even have to be the distant future for what you're
right,
talking about
for sure.
either. When you look at, like, I think the high end of what is reasonable to expect for the NYXL is the San Francisco Shock season 2. And when you look at that team, sure, they were second place in the first stage playoffs.
Yes.
But they like limped in there with a 4-3 record and like got in on a tiebreaker. And, they took them a little bit out of the gate to really get things figured out and to get things going. And, listen, the question, I agree with you 100%. This is the right amount of change. It feels like the right number of player moves. And a lot of them, I think, were correct. Flower was not fitting in. It didn't work. Whether it was, I don't want to get into a conversation about whether he's good enough or whatever. There's a lot of opinion there. It's not relevant. He's gone. The question is, was it the right for Meko? And that's the one I'm not sure of. I'm also not sure they had a choice there. I think he might have wanted to cash in a little bit. And so he chose to leave. But standing still wasn't an option though, right? So they changed who they changed, whatever the reason was. And when you look at the roster, there's still a lot here to like. What I want to see from this team to get them back is I want to see Libero on the bench. I'm sorry. He's a very good player. He is that jack of all trades. I learned last year he's the master of none, because when you're that I can play anything and I can play it super well guy, you have to literally be profit level and you have to pop off and you have to play them at that elite level.
Right.
And where was NYXL's elite May? Where was NYXL's elite Reaper play? These are characters that have been in the game forever. So somebody that's supposed to be your Swiss Army knife, if he can't pick those up, what is he doing? Why is he there? What is he playing? And that had to come from him. He was the one that had to do it. And if they had one elite DPS player at some point last year, their playoff could have been completely different. Their stage 4 could have been completely different. They could have flipped the script, had more momentum, whatever it is. I don't know. I also want to see a more aggressive play style from this team, right? When you're adding a player like Who Are You, okay, you need to adapt and you need to play around him. I'm with you. Let's base the team around him. Let's give him our support. Let's let Jonak be a support player, okay? He doesn't need to DPS. If you fall into a Zenyatta meta and you have success with it, by all means, adapt. Do what you need to do. Play to your strengths. But I don't think you can play that passive style when you don't have him on Zenyatta. It doesn't feel like it works to the same degree.
Right.
So listen, this is clearly still a playoff team, even without Meko, even with question marks at DPS and what are they going to do there? Support lines and tank lines are hugely important. So I do need to see one of these two off tanks step up and at least be above average to adequate in order to really just kind of confirm that this is a playoff team. But I've never seen Hotba not be at bare minimum adequate. So this isn't a situation where they're going to fall off completely, but did they take a step forward or did they take a step backwards? There's a lot of room on both sides of them right now. They can do either. So it's gonna come down to the coaching staff, like you said. It's gonna be really, really important. But Blevins, they were 22-6 in their total match record last year. What are they in 2020?
Oh, well, I mean, that's obvious. They're going to go 28-0. Like, disregard everything I said.
They're going to start slow. It's going to be a rebuild, and they're never going to lose. Okay.
Right, of course. I mean, that's obvious to me. If I'm being reasonable, I'm not. So I'm not even going to give you a reasonable answer. Of course I'm not being reasonable.
I'll give the reasonable answer. You don't need to be reasonable. That's another reason to have a co-host. So you can just unabashedly support your team, and something can get out that may be a closer to accurate. But I'm going to look at this team as, again, like I said, I'm expecting a little bit of a slower start. They're going to get it together. They're going to be decisively on the positive side of the win ratio here. There are going to be a couple wins back from the big dogs, as I would project it, assuming they don't take massive steps in either direction. I think it's going to... And that's the most likely outcome to me, is that they're about what they were this year, right? So it'll be a question of, do they get hot at the right time at the end of the year? Is the meta friendly to them? That sort of a thing, like everybody else in the league. So I'm going to put them at 17-11. I don't even know that would have moved them in the standings had they been last year. But
it's reasonable.
Yeah, pretty close.
Probably would have moved them down 1 or 2 spots.
Maybe a spot. I'm going to check it right now.
Yeah. It's definitely... This also, I think, much like my, I mean, I guess it's kind of unfair.
They'd have been fourth. One spot down.
1 spot down. So yeah, that's not unreasonable.
And I'll be dropping the person that was above them that would have been above them down anyway. So that'll be spoiler alert. That will be keeping them at 3rd place in the way I'll do these. Sure.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to our last team for this episode. That is going to be the 4th place Hangzhou Spark.
Yeah, they released Revenge and Bazi, and they traded No Smite over to Paris. So we don't have any additions for this Hangzhou Spark. We've got a couple of significant departures, but one thing I will say about the departures is those feel like players that were in the running for the starting spot at the beginning of last year and then weren't by the end of the year. So it's probably going to be a pretty similar starting 6 you see on the stage. Last year they were good for a 4th place finish. They got 3rd in stage 2 and they got 5th in stage 3. They were a team that steadily and consistently made strides and got better as the season went on. That's the one thing that I think is really indisputable when you watch them. Gouchouet leveled up tremendously once he got the reins and went in, and they stabilized their roster. They figured out what they wanted to do, and they went with it. Now, this is the Crystal team, right?
Sure is.
Pretty sure.
It is.
So they didn't do anything there, which is just insane to me.
According to Wikipedia, he's still just suspended.
So, yeah, I don't know what that means. I don't know what's going on there. And I do think they looked significantly worse without him. So they must be planning on getting him back. I don't know how they're planning on relying on him. Maybe he's somebody that will just be massively benefited by the traveling. You know, one of the few that will just really like it more, right? Because if the guy just was so homesick and just wanted to be able to be around his family, his friends, his girlfriend back home, whatever it was, I don't know. and don't care, show up to work.
Right. Right.
But if that fixes it, right? If it gives him the ability to, hey, you've got a week, you know what I mean? Like, you're not playing next weekend, and we ended in right near home. You can jump home real fast. You can spend, that could really help a player like that maybe wasn't the rigors that weren't the problem. It was just the being homesick, the missing your friends and family and all those things. I really don't know. And I won't speculate and assume that he will. But I guess at the end of the day, I really do have them taking a step back, and in large part because I don't know what's going on with Crystal. And I think they had a real chance to stay there or maybe continue to grow, right? A team that got consistently better as the season went on, you know, game after game after game, has a real chance to level up without additions in the next season, right? This is an expansion team. The coaching staff's going to be better prepared and have a better plan for these guys. All these things are true, but if they don't have the roster, right? If they don't have their guys and they didn't replace him with anybody, and they looked a little subpar to their own standard without him at the end of last year, then what can we really sit here and expect them to do? All right, so I did the last year finishes. As far as bad maps goes, we've got Kings Row at 25%, Numbani 33%, Lijiang Tower 44%, Rialto 40%, Route 66 25%, and Temple of Anubis is down at 33%. So there's a fair few maps these guys struggled on. I think a lot of these numbers and bad numbers come from the way the map pools rotated throughout the stage. And when you get better over the course of time, those maps that were early season, you're going to be worse on. I don't know that that's the case for all of these, but it just seems a little hard to reconcile, I guess, seeing that many, that number increase when you go from talking about the third team to the fourth team by that much. But maybe it'll be a rude awakening when we get to number 5, and maybe they're doing just fine. I really don't know, because overall the map win percentages were pretty decent here. One below 50% with Hybrid at 49, Control was 57, Escort 56, Assault was 53%. They were 18-10 overall. They got him the 4th seed going into the playoffs. Blevins, is there a reasonable expectation of improvement that fans can have for this team without any of those additions? How do they get better without adding it?
The only way I really see them being better is, like you said, without Crystal, and it looks like, according to Liquipedia, Bazzi is still on the team as a 2-way player.
I said released. They re-signed him, and that's what the notes say, and I can't read. I'm sorry. They re-signed Bazzi, and I'm just
they re-signed
illiterate.
him. He didn't resign. He didn't resign. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, the only reason, and was it him that was replacing Crystal? I'm forgetting who ended up, or was it Godsby was already playing, I believe. Was it Adora?
I think
it's been so long.
Because wasn't he their Doomfist?
It's been a while, and there was a
long,
team that I didn't follow particularly closely, so I'll just take the L on that one. But regardless, what I think the point I'm trying to make is, before it was Crystal got suspended and someone had to rise up to the occasion, right? And they did start to get better, but you know they never really seemed like an elite team. They were hyped up as a potential up and comer, like as hyped up as a potential elite team, but they never really lived up to that hype. They were always perfectly fine. I mean, 4th place is certainly a good finish for season 2, but they never really seemed to be that like upper tier level team. What they know now is that, well, they either know that Crystal is going to be playing or that he's not, right? So the player who is replacing him knows that that's their spot. They've known for the whole offseason. They've known for some amount of time and have been able to prepare for that, right? They're not, you know, they've been scrimming. They've had all the time put into them. They've had everything since then. So the only way that I see them potentially improve is because of that. They know what their roster is. They're not playing around a suspension, even if the player on paper may be a lower tier player, possibly. Again, Gouchouet, we've talked about, once he kind of got the reins and the keys to the Cadillac, like I've said 58 times this episode, he really leveled up. And we saw hints of that before, but he wasn't starting some of the games, we're like, what is going on? They have their roster set. They know what they're doing. They're coming in. I mean, again, like I talked about with San Francisco, like the teams that are running it back, they have somewhat of an advantage coming into it because they're just running the same roster. They don't have any new people learning the system. They don't have anyone that they're not familiar with. I mean, much like we saw Vancouver, they essentially were running it back in their first season because they came right from contenders. And there's certainly an advantage to that, and being able to just have that familiarity again. We've talked about how the team chemistry and the locker room side of things are going to be huge in this season 3 with the travel and whatnot. So there's a possibility that they get a little bit better just because of that consistency. But man, it is really hard to make that call when we're not seeing anything new and you're in a spot where you really could have used at least one shakeup or two.
Yeah, I think what you said is actually really, really smart, and I've got some examples.
Clip it. That's the first time that's ever happened.
I'm as surprised as you are, Chad. I really am right there with you. But there's a very big difference between suspending one of your players for discipline in the end of stage 3 and starting a season knowing you're not going to have them, or even it happening very, very early in a year. You have time to adapt. You have time to grow as the new unit. The examples here being not the first time the New England Patriots were caught red-handed cheating, not the third time that's currently actively under investigation right now. The owner of the Boston Uprising owns that team as well. I'm just pointing it out there, just throwing it out there.
Had to happen.
See if anybody. But the second time they were caught red-handed cheating, their quarterback was suspended for 4 games. They went 3-1 over those 4 games, right? And that's without the best quarterback to ever lace up cleats in the NFL and to pick up the ball. Who gave him that loss, Blevins? Oh, it was Buffalo. Okay, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew. It was in Foxborough. We're headed there on Saturday. Repeat. But anyways, I'll digress.
Get them all out. Come on, get them all out now.
I'm super pumped about football, guys. But they also had a year where he went down in week 1. They won 11 games that year. Okay. They figured it out with the new guy. They did what they needed to do. They adapted, they planned, they coached. The coach is coached. Go figure, right? They can do that when they have time and when they have notice. So it makes a very big difference. And I think it's great to bring that up. It doesn't have to mean a slow start, right? They could be a team that gets off to a fast start because they have some synergy and things like that. But also we don't have reason to think the guy's gone, right? So he could just, hey, you're back now. You have to serve the 4 games we issued you, and then you're good to go. So that they could be a situation like that for all we know. We'll hope for some clarity on that as the season gets a little closer. So I guess let's look at the records. You want to go first or second there?
I'll go first here. I was thinking about it, and I'm just not super excited about them. I've got them. Man, I kind of have them on my closer to my low end of Vancouver here at around a 16-12 record, maybe 17-11. I just don't know. I mean, when I'm just trying to like compare these to where you're putting New York, where I'm putting I'm leaning towards maybe a 16-12 record. I do think that they have that ability. Maybe if I just really quickly look at their.
Keep in mind too, my numbers are always going to be low. I'm gonna lowball everybody's win totals 1 through 20.
Well, so they've got a real tester opening. Their opening day. Oh no, sorry, that's week 2. They're not playing week 1. So their opening game is against Seoul, who I think a lot of people are marking up as a big contender here. They made huge changes. Arguably the biggest changes in terms of just individual players in the league. So, I mean, that game is a huge statement game. If they get dumpstered by Seoul in their first game, man, the rest of the season could just be downhill from there. But they could also make a big statement against a team like that. Like that game in week 2 is actually might be one of the more pivotal games because it's going to show us, is it consistency from season 2? It's consistency versus season 2 versus arguably biggest changes in the league. So that'll be a really big match. But I think if I had to put an official guess on paper, I'm giving them my 16 and 12.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 15 and 13. Shade over 500. They've got a lot to figure out. They've got a lot to prove before you can count them to be as good as they were last year, or even to only regress a little bit, I think. So for now, everything's going to look real boring, and the top four are currently top four, but I can tell you some of these teams that we'll cover later on will leapfrog up and join these guys at their win totals or something along those lines here very soon. But yeah, I'm going to put them. They're not going to be a bad team. There's a lot of talent here. Outside Gouchway, though, I just don't know if there's the star power to really have them pop off and take off like crazy. Maybe they can develop somebody. Maybe somebody does level up. But until we see that, I think we have to assume they're probably about what they finished the year at. And that's better than average, but not great. So I'll go 15 and 13 for now. It feels safe, if not a little cowardly, to not have a massive opinion on them. But it's hard to predict huge changes when they didn't make any huge changes, right? So regression to the mean is about 500. They're going to be a little closer to that. And yeah, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, it's really hard to judge these teams that didn't make any big changes, especially when we don't know the meta and blah 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 all the stuff we've been talking about.
And they're so massively in the minority, right? There were so many shakeups when you look at the league as a whole that there's going to be massive power shifts and power changes, and some of them will be from these teams that didn't do much. Like, it's going to happen. One of these four teams that didn't, I mean, New York did a decent amount, but so one of these three teams that didn't do very much here is really going to, I guess Vancouver did. I don't know. There's a couple others that are light on the moves. You get my point, right? Like, just because it looks boring doesn't mean it's going to be bad. Or just because it looks like, oh, they were the champions, they didn't lose anything, how could they just suddenly be bad? San Francisco could be bad. I'm not betting on it. They still got a bunch of talent. They still got Krusty. I'm not betting on it. Super possible, though.
Absolutely. And, I mean, again, we're going to be seeing not just these teams develop, but the league develop, not even the in-game meta, but the meta of the Overwatch League itself. What works from season to season? We've only had one transition now. This is going to be our second. This is going to be an even bigger one because of all the stuff we know about Season 3 and for Overwatch League 2020. But we are going to have at least a few more weeks to talk about it as we go through the rest of the teams, but that's going to be it for this one.
No episode next week. Have a Merry Christmas, everyone. Enjoy the time with your families. You too, bud.
Yeah, you too. It's gonna be good. We're gonna have some good holiday fun. And we hope you do too. But that's gonna be it, guys. Thank you everyone for listening. Guys, if you haven't already, make sure you're checking out all of our stuff at highnoonpodcast.com. And you can listen to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We've got a lot of new people on Spotify, so if you prefer that, we do have it. In case you didn't know already, YouTube's going to be back up as well. If you do want to support us with some of that green money, you certainly can over at patreon.com/highnoonpodcast. All of that does help us get to events, do the cool sort of stuff that we do at grand finals, as well as other things. So that does really help us out a ton. You can do that at patreon.com/highnoonpodcast. Of course,
no matter what country you're from, too, no matter what color your money actually is, you can still donate.
That is true. It all gets converted back to Patreon coins, which I don't know what color Patreon coins are because they're not a real thing. But you get what I mean. You can also find us on Twitter at High Noon Podcast, pretty much High Noon Podcast, everywhere that you can find anything. And Deathblow, actually, you're going to be doing some little non-boomer, little TikTok action for some Overwatch League stuff. I know you've been playing around.
I'm messing around with it a little bit. It's a weird platform.
It is.
There's a lot to like about it as a content creator. I don't like it much as a content consumer. But that said, I'm a creator, not a consumer. So I'm
Right.
gonna mess with it a little bit. I'm gonna see what I can do. It's basically, while my computer's still far too much of a potato to even think about rendering video, I let my phone do it.
Yeah.
Is basically my rule of thumb there. So I think it's at HNP Deathblow just on TikTok. If you're on there and you want to give me the follow, feel free. It's going to be a lot of owl highlights. We might do some spoof commentary things. You might hear some Blevins voices on occasion, depending on how creative I get with my writing and things like that. So there's some ideas, no promises though, but I'm dabbling.
I like it. I am excited for it. I hope you end up going for it. But that's gonna be it, guys. Thank you everyone for listening. For Deathblow, I am the Blevins. Remember, it's high noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time till I find mine.
Okay, you need to decide it for us now, listeners. Do go in Discord and put a at Kyle Win and put a number 1 if I'm the boomer of the show, and put at Kyle Win and a number 2 if Deathblow is the real boomer, and just put an at Kyle Win with nothing if it's both of us.